This video is about making a beautiful yet highly functional finish on your tool handles using drying oils. Check that beauty out. Oh yeah. Stephen Edholm here, and I think today's video is pretty cool. I hope you do too, but I'm kind of a dork, so maybe not. Anyway, it's about getting a really nice functional finish on your tool handles. Oil finishes nourish the wood, they soak in and bond with the wood, and they have an excellent grip. Just really all around can't be beat for tool handle finishes as far as I know. They never flake off because they're bonded with the wood and they're tough and elastic. So basically today I'm going to talk about which oils you can and cannot use to get a good finish on your tool handles and why. And then I'm going to kind of tell you just how I go about doing it. This is all based on practical experience. So let's talk briefly about types of oils here. Oils are divided into two extreme classes. One is drying and the other is non-drying. So drying oils are the ones we're interested in, but let's talk about these for a second. Non-drying oils, coconut and oil and tallow are really good examples. Olive oil is also non-drying, although it contains about 15% of these type of oils. And these are typically solid at room temperature. They are highly saturated, and that makes them highly stable. So they don't oxidize easily. Like, you can keep coconut around literally for years and it's still edible. And that makes them not useful for what we're doing. These oils are highly, highly unstable. I mean, as soon as air hits them, especially in the presence of light and heat and water, which contains oxygen, these start to oxidize immediately. And that's cool because they undergo a process called polymerization. So what that does is the oxygen, it absorbs oxygen, like the oils will actually gain weight from just absorbing oxygen out of the air. And the molecules link together. It's called cross-linking, but they form eventually they form basically a malleable plastic material, basically. And so that's great because that's exactly what we want on our tool handle. Now, polymerization is the same thing that you see happening, like if you've ever unscrewed your jar of cooking oil. You'll see this kind of gummy stuff that's all sticky and plasticky around the top, or kind of like rubber. That is polymerized oil. So let's talk about these different oils for a minute. Linseed is kind of the workhorse, but we'll come back to that in a minute. Tung oil is said to dry faster. I've used it. I used to have a can of it, but I think it had solvents in it and stuff, and I don't know. It's fine, but it's twice the price, and for stuff like this, linseed oil is great. Hemp oil, you'll see a lot of hype about, and a lot of that's just bullshit, basically. It's like hemp industry propaganda, not that there is a hemp industry, but by people who say they want one. And, you know, it's basically like they just think that hemp's better for everything that you could use hemp for, like if it's cloth or rope, or animal feed or whatever, you know, hemp's always the best thing ever. But I've read a whole lot of old literature, and those people are clearly ignoring all the many citations that basically say that hemp oil is either, you know, just okay or it's inferior to linseed oil. So don't believe the hype. Stuff's way too expensive. You buy these little things in the health food store. I mean, you can buy industrial hemp oil, but it's still a lot more than linseed. Tung oil is twice the price. So really, I think linseed is the bomb. Okay, I got my hemp rant out of the way. Not really. If I really went off, don't get me started. Okay, so let's get into some specifics about linseed oil. I think every household that isn't completely domesticated should have a bottle of drying oil around, and linseed's a great choice. But there's two kinds, essentially. What is available out there, for the most part, is pure raw linseed oil, and what is called boiled linseed oil. Now, boiled linseed oil is not boiled linseed oil. It's basically oil that's been heated to make it oxidize more easily, mixed with some raw oil and some heavy metals and solvents. So the metals, I I know that I can't remember what all of them are, but lead is one that's pretty much always mentioned. And that's enough for me. Once I found out it had lead in it, I just quit using it. And I used to use this stuff because I just thought it was boiled linseed oil, and that the heating process of boiling it, which is not actually boiled, but that's another story, made it dry faster. And then I noticed that every time I used it, like clockwork, I would get this like heartburn feeling, and it would last the rest of the day. It was really uncomfortable, and it just didn't make any sense. I was like, why? It's just boiled oil. But if you read the thing, actually read the warnings and everything, which he does that, it says on there, use in a ventilated area, don't get it on your hands for prolonged periods of time, etc., etc. So yeah, it turns out it has all this crap in it. So you would think, and I thought, and a lot of people I'm sure think, that what's going to happen if I use raw oil and not boiled oil? Like, is my finish going to dry or cure, or isn't it? And I have not found that to be any problem at all. So basically the difference in drying time between boiled and raw linseed oil is really, it's a matter of days. It's not a matter of weeks or months. So I just wouldn't worry about that. I have found it to be perfectly fine as long as you use it properly and don't put it on ridiculously thick. We'll talk about that next. So oiling a handle like this that's been well maintained already is different than oiling something that's just raw wood. So I got this at, a flea market or something. It's just a finishing hammer. And it had this like plasticky crap that they put on handles, which I generally just don't like at all. I'm going to call it lacquer. And what I'll do with that stuff is I just take my knife at a right angle and I scrape it all off along with a thin layer of wood. And that's because while that stuff it tends to not bond well and flake off of handles. I mean, everyone's seen that, and that's why I don't like it. Well, there are other reasons too. It also doesn't nourish the wood like oil does. But it does soak into the outer layer of wood into the pores. It doesn't seem to cause it to bond any better, but it does soak in. So the handle will be more receptive to oil if you scrape off also a layer of wood along with the lacquer. Old crusty dried up handles like this that are weathered are basically treated the same as a brand new raw piece of wood. And so are all of the rest, actually. Even the well-finished handles, the basic rule of thumb is you're going to put oil on it, and if it soaks up the oil, put on some more until it stops soaking it up. It's really that simple. The way I do this is with a handle like this, if at all possible, I'll work in a warm area, either next to the wood stove in the winter, or I'll just put the tools out in the sun. And then however long it takes for the oil to soak in, just go out and put on another thick layer of oil and leave it in the sun or wherever. Warm until that's absorbed, put on another layer, put extra on the end grain because this is how the tree grows. And the way that water and nutrients get to the top of the tree is through these capillaries. So when you put oil on the end grain, it's just going to suck it up. So just put extra on there. And eventually you're going to come out, an hour or two later, and there's just going to be a few dry patches and it's mostly wet. Put on another layer maybe, but eventually you just want to leave it with a relatively thin layer. So just kind of wipe it till it's a thin layer and then just leave it to dry for a few days. So that's how I do new handles. And if I'm doing that, or if I'm oiling like a piece of furniture or something, I'll always end up with an oily rag. So when I do handles, I'm not trying to build up multiple layers all in one go. Basically, for me, it just works into the rhythm of work around the homestead in that, once or twice a year I find myself with an oily linseed rag. I run around, I oil my handles, and then I use them. And using these will really polish them up. If it's a tool that you use a lot, it's going to show. I'm going to look at that handle and say, oh, wow, that has an awesome finish on it because I use it. I'm not like trying to make a faux finish or build this up really fast, because you don't really need to. As long as you're using and taking care of your tools, they're going to build up a really nice finish, and it's going to end up looking really nice because it's just polished from your hands. You can hit it with fine steel wool or a piece of leather and burnish it down a little bit and then add some more. if you don't use a tool really at all, like say you have some hammer that you never use, and you just keep adding layer after layer, eventually it might form kind of a dull, sticky finish. So those, I just don't oil those. You know, if I run into one of those, like some hammer that I never use, then I just quit oiling them. But the tools that I use a lot, they always can use a light coat, and that's just how I do it. It works into the rhythm of my other work. Now, safety, real quick. These rags can spontaneously combust. That is because the oxidation of the oil that causes polymerization, which is what we want. Remember, highly unstable oils, they can oxidize so fast that they'll build up enough heat to catch on fire. And the way that happens is people end up wadding them up and stuffing them somewhere, or putting them in an enclosed environment where they still get oxygen, but they're watered up enough to build up heat and they can actually catch on fire. So you just want to make sure that when you're done, you just hang them up somewhere, preferably in the shade probably. I mean, I have dried them in the sun, but theoretically that could also cause spontaneous combustion. Basically, I am maintaining my handles and building up the finish at the same time. This probably has the best finish of any handle I have, and it is 25 or 30 years old, long that I made this handle. So it's just had and I use it a lot. So it always gets a coat of oil, and it has just layer upon layer of linseed oil added to it. Beautiful. And let's just go over, let's just summarize real quick here. So linseed oil is great. Use a drying oil. Hemp oil is okay. Tung oil is okay. Poppy seed, walnut, but all those are expensive. So just get a can of raw linseed oil. It's pretty cheap. I'll try to remember to put a link in the description. Use thin layers. Don't put it on super thick thinking that that's going to gain you a finish quicker, because it usually won't. If you put on a thin layer, it's really exposed to oxygen, and that's what we want. It's not really drying off. Don't think of it as drying off, even though they say that. They say that because it stops looking wet, and so they say it's dry. But really what's happening is it's oxidizing and cross-linking and polymerizing because this thin layer is heavily exposed to oxygen. So if I put on a really thick layer, the oxygen is going to take longer to get to the bottom of that layer and polymerize it. So you're better off doing thin layers, let each layer cure between, and then add another thin layer. That's with raw linseed oil in the sun, that's really only like 2 days, 2 or 3 days. Even in the shade, it just doesn't take that long. So give each handle as much oil as it will absorb whenever you oil it. Don't stop in the middle of oiling a new handle. So like this, I'm kind of committed now to go ahead and oil this thoroughly. I'll probably do that tomorrow and just let it soak up as much oil as possible, and this one too. Because if you put on a thin layer and it dries and seals, the oil won't penetrate as deep. So you really want to hit dried up tools and new raw handles that are real thirsty like this with as much oil as they'll take the first time around. And then after that, you can just do thin layers. So that's how I do it. I mean, I'm basically like building up my finish and maintaining the tools at the same time. So in terms of otherwise maintenance, basically sunlight and weather in general is going to degrade this finish for sure. So don't leave your tools out in the weather if possible. I still do it more than I should. You know, we're all human, but it will degrade your oil finishes and require that you put it on more frequently and just ruin your handles anyway, no matter what. Stay tuned for more cool homesteading. I'm going to be doing some paleo techniques type skills, fire making, cordage. I got all kinds of stuff in store. Lots more tanning and skin working, skinning. I got tons of stuff. If you're interested in self-reliance type skills and understanding what you're doing, rather than me just saying, you know, do this, I'm going to tell you, no, you're using drying oils, stuff like that. Because the more stuff you know like that, you just don't know where you're going to end up using it, but if you do a lot of different stuff, you will end up using it. You know, the more of this stuff you understand and the way your world works, the more you can kind of riff off your environment or whatever you have and come up with new ideas and projects. So yeah, stick around. I hope you'll subscribe. subscribe. Wait, subscribe. Subscribe. Bet you can't. Bet you can't click it. Later. Alright, I'm just going to rant about hemp here for a minute. Actually, not hemp. Hemp is awesome. Hemp is amazing. Truly, it is an amazing, useful plant. But it is not the best thing for everything that has ever grown on the fucking planet. And, you know, you hear this, these people, I mean, literally around here where I live, there's people with bumper stickers that say basically that hemp can save the world. That's like the dumbest fucking idea I've ever heard. You know, it's a plant. It can be used as a tool like any other plant. But a lot of what people run around parroting that they heard about hemp is just bullshit. And, you know, they're going to be telling you that, you know, we can green the deserts with hemp because it'll basically grow anywhere on any soil. You know what? That's almost true. But it won't produce anything. I mean, you know, it's like if it grows as a weed on poor soil with no water and no nitrogen, it's going to be this fucking big, and it's not going to make anything. It's not going to make fiber or seeds or whatever. So yeah, it'll grow anywhere, but you know, you can't, not enough to use for anything. And then, you know, every product from it is going to be the best product ever. Like hemp fabric is, you know, this is like the best thing ever. I have never seen a fiber reference in any, you know, of the many old books I read on stuff like that ever said that hemp was superior to linen. It's always considered inferior to linen. In what ways? Probably in refinement, you know, for making fine fabrics. I'm sure it's just absolutely great for making jeans and canvas and you know, rough goods like that, and probably even pretty nice cloth. But to say that it's, you know, the best thing ever, simply not true. Otherwise, everyone would have grown that instead of